Good morning. It's March 15th on a Wednesday, and I'm wondering if any of you out there are fighting something that's really big, bigger than you, bigger than anything you've ever fought before. Well, if you haven't, you will, because eventually we all reach that point where there's something really big that we just don't think we can handle, and we're scared of it, and we try to run away from it even. Well, you've all heard the story of David and Goliath, maybe, but I'm going to tell you where this actually started, because it didn't start with David killing the Goliath. It started back when Saul was the king. Samuel was a prophet. He was a great prophet and man of God, and he had made Saul king according to God. But then Saul he committed some sin, and God actually regretted that he had made Saul king. So he said to Samuel, the Lord said, stop mourning for Saul, seeing as how I have rejected him, and fill your horn with oil and go. I'm sending you to Jesse, a man who has some sons, so I provided myself a king among his sons. So Samuel went ahead and went to this man named Jesse, who was already pretty old, and he had a bunch of sons. And so he asked Jesse, he said, can I see your sons? And he said, I need to anoint one of them. Now, anointing is a special way of making someone holy, or putting oil on them, or consecrating them so that they are special. Now, anybody can put oil on anybody, but anointing comes from God. And so, Jesse, he showed him his sons. The first one was a big, strong, oldest one, and, Samuel said, surely the Lord's anointed is before him. And then the Lord said to Samuel, this is one of the first lessons, do not look at his appearance or at his physical stature, for I have refused him. For the Lord does not see as man sees, for man looks at the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart. So, sure enough, we do. We're always looking at the outward appearance, but God looks at our heart. So anyway, he found the very youngest one was out in the field taking care of the sheep, and that was David. And he brought him, and God said, yes, arise, anoint him, for this is the one. So he anointed him, and it said the Spirit of the Lord came upon David from that day forward. So David already had the Spirit of the Lord. He was not king. He hadn't killed Goliath. He already had the Spirit of the Lord. And he was tending the sheep mostly, so he had a lot of time to talk to God out there, just him and the sheep. And he learned a lot of lessons of nature and things. And so sure enough, then Saul, the king, it said the Spirit of the Lord departed from Saul, and a distressing spirit from the Lord troubled him. So God actually gave Saul a distressing spirit. And Saul's like desperate, trying to get this out of his head. Maybe he was depressed, we don't know. But he's like, find somebody who can play me some music and soothe me. And one of his servants says, well, I know a guy that tends sheep, and he plays really well, good harp. And so they called David. And so David was playing the harp for Saul, for the king. And, he became his armor bearer. And so he was kind of like, the guy that kind of helped the king all the time. And then, by the way, when David would play the music, the distressing spirit that was bothering Saul would leave him alone. Well, then, of course, they come up to Goliath, and they're having this war, and they found this really big guy. I mean, he was bigger than a normal man. We don't know. It does say he was 6 cubits in a span. Well, I don't know how big that is, but it's pretty big. He was a giant. And he's making fun of Israel. And, David's brothers they were all there fighting the war, and Jesse, his father, said to David, "Go feed your brothers. Go take some food to them, and take some food to the army. Help them out a little bit with the supplies and stuff." So he went over there, and then he sees Goliath, and he says, "Well, what's going on here? How come nobody's fighting him? What are you going to do for the guy that kills him?" And his brothers, the oldest brother, he says, kind of, he was already mad at David, because I suppose they knew he'd been anointed, and they don't maybe know for what, but they were probably already jealous. And um, he's like, "Why'd you come down here? And who did you leave those few sheep with in the wilderness?" He's kind of like saying, "See, you're not a responsible person." But it does say David left his sheep with a caretaker of sheep, and he left the supplies with people. I mean, you can tell he's a responsible guy. And then Saul says, "Well, you can't fight him." And David says, "Well, I used to take care of my father's sheep, and I would kill the lion and the bear that would come to take the lamb." And he convinced Saul that he could do it. And the rest of the story is basically where he didn't use any armor or anything, but there are some important words. And when the big Goliath, he saw David, he says, "Oh, great, this is who you're sending to me to fight me." And this is interesting because David said, "You come to me with a sword and a spear and a javelin, but I come to you in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you've defied." And then he says, "All this assembly will know that the Lord does not save with sword or spear, for the battle is the Lord's, and he will give you into our hands." And so that's the final lesson, really, is that God doesn't fight with the usual things. David wasn't putting on the armor. He didn't have a sword. He didn't have a javelin like everybody else. We all think, okay, how does somebody fight this thing? We go to the lawyers, we do this, we do that. But if you leave it in God's hands, he'll take care of it, and he will fight it in his own way. But we always think we know better, and we always try to do it our way, don't we? So you take those lessons and you think about them, and you relate that to that big thing in your life. And if you ask God to take care of it, you'll have a much better chance. Then you can win. So you have a great day, and God bless you.